I saw it the other morning, the bike, leaning half-forgotten against the rusted shed wall, its once bright red frame now dulled by years of rain and memory. The chain hung limp, the seat was torn, and one of the handlebars had a faded blue ribbon still tied to it. I hadn't touched it in years, but my hand moved to it before I even realized. I brushed my fingers across the handle, and the dust came off like time itself peeling back. That was the bike I used to ride every morning, the one with the squeaky brakes and the loose pedal that I never got around to fixing. I used to hoist him onto the back seat, bundle him up in his little jacket, and pedal through the chill, dodging potholes, weaving through sleepy traffic, just to get him to school before the bell. It was our ritual. He'd chatter the whole way there, pointing out dogs, birds, garbage trucks, anything. And I'd listen. Not always fully, not always with a smile, but I listened. I pushed us through puddles, through wind that made my eyes tear up, through heat that soaked my back in sweat. I pedaled, because that was love, my kind of love. Silent muscle burning, never asking for thanks. Now I ride the city bus, alone. Every Thursday morning, like clockwork, I shuffle to the stop outside the nursing home with a folded piece of paper listing my appointments and a granola bar in my bag in case the wait gets long. I sit quietly by the window, the plastic seats cold through my coat, and watch the city pass me by. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of a parent biking their child, and it's like watching a ghost version of myself. It makes my throat tighten in a way I can't explain. He doesn't know I still have the bike. I don't think he remembers it. I don't think he remembers much of me before I became the woman who calls too often, who asks for too little, who says it's okay, even when it isn't. When he was small, he used to rest his head against my back as I pedaled, and his tiny hands would hold the sides of my shirt. I remember once he whispered, "You're the best mommy in the world," and I nearly swerved off the road because I started crying. He was 4. He meant it. But time is a thief, isn't it? It doesn't just steal your youth or your strength. It steals how you were seen. I used to be a lighthouse in his storm. Now I'm a postscript on his checklist. I suppose what shocks me most isn't that he forgot the bike or the lunches or the games we used to play on the ride. It's that I didn't. I remember everything. I remember his little feet swinging in time with the pedals. I remember how he used to shout, "Faster, Mama," and how I would pretend I was in a race just to make him giggle. I don't know when exactly the shift happened. One day I blinked, and the child who clung to my hand now holds his phone tighter than my name. One day my voice stopped being something he looked for. It became something he avoided. And maybe that's what this story really is, not a complaint, not an accusation, but a long, slow whisper of what it feels like to go from being someone's everything to their nothing. Not all at once, gradually. So gradually you don't even notice until you're standing alone in front of a rusty bike, wondering if the person who used to ride it behind you would even recognize the woman you've become. I locked the shed back up after that. I didn't cry. I just stood there a moment longer than I needed to, fingers resting on that bent handlebar, remembering the warmth of a little body pressed against my back and the sound of small laughter cutting through morning fog. There's a grief that comes with being forgotten. Not dramatic grief, not the kind that wails and shakes fists, just quiet grief, like dust settling on a beloved thing no one uses anymore. There was a time not too long ago, though it feels like another lifetime, when my entire day revolved around what I could pack into a lunchbox. I would rise before the sun boil eggs, cut sandwiches into fun shapes, and slip tiny notes into the napkin folds. You can do anything. I'm proud of you. Love you to the moon. I never signed them. I didn't need to. He knew. I still remember the look on his face when he'd open his lunch. He once told me that the note was his favorite part, that it made him feel like I was with him, even when the classroom felt too loud or too lonely. I held on to that tighter than I ever held a photograph. Those notes were my way of saying I see you, I believe in you, and I'm with you, even from afar. Now I eat alone in the common room of the nursing home. Lunch is always at noon. The same plastic trays, the same lukewarm soup, the same quiet clinking of metal spoons against bowls. No one writes notes here. No one even looks up most days. The television is always on set too loud, but no one's really watching. Some just stare. Some nod off. Sometimes I bring my own snack just to feel like I still have a choice. A little chocolate, crackers, fruit, if my neighbor downstairs gives me some. But mostly it's the silence I've learned to chew through. Last week, one of the other women, Dora, I think her name is, got a visit from her daughter. I watched from across the room. She brought flowers, actual flowers. They hugged, laughed, took pictures. I didn't mean to watch, but it felt like someone had opened a window and let in a memory. For a second I felt warm. He doesn't visit, hasn't in months, but I still prepare for it like he might. I brush my hair, put on my softer cardigan. The blue one, he once said, made me look safe. I sit by the window on Thursdays because that's when he used to come, just once or twice, and always in a rush. But now even that has faded. I tell myself stories, that he's busy, that life gets in the way, that he's doing well and that should be enough. But that lie is harder to swallow than the soup. Once I baked cookies and kept them in a tin near the front desk just in case he showed up unexpectedly. He never did. The cookies went stale. The tin is still there. So am I. I think about all the ways I showed love, the lunches, the walks, the gentle tucking in at night, the cool cloth on his forehead when he had a fever. None of it loud, none of it flashy. But love, real love, isn't a firework. It's a steady flame. And still the phone sits silent. There's a man here, Robert, whose daughter calls every day at 3. He reads the paper while waiting, and when the phone rings, he lights up like a boy. He says she always asks how he slept, if he's comfortable, if he needs anything. I once joked she must have packed a lot of good lunches. He smiled, but I could feel the sting in my own voice. I don't blame him, or her, or anyone, but some days I wish I didn't have to pretend I'm full when I'm really just swallowing absence. It's not just the food, it's the remembering. It's the ache of knowing you once fed someone with love so pure it could have lit 1,000 stars, and now you sit with a tray of mush and a memory of crusts cut into hearts. I think he threw my notes away. I don't know for sure. I used to imagine him keeping them, maybe taping one to his desk, or finding one years later and smiling. But now, I suspect they were tossed with the napkins crumpled and forgotten. I don't write notes anymore. But sometimes in my mind I do. I write one now. You don't have to call, just think of me once. I fold it in my heart, press it tight, and tuck it into the quiet. It was the silence that got me, not the kind that comes at night that I can handle, not even the kind that hangs in the hallways here echoing softly between coughs and nurses' shoes. No, this was different. This was the kind that comes from a door closing, and no voice on the other side to say I'll miss you. The day he moved out, I stood in the kitchen folding his last clean shirt, pretending like it was any other laundry day. The machines hummed. The sun came through the blinds in strips. I even put on music, something gentle, as if calm sounds could hold back what I knew was coming. He didn't hug me. He didn't even say thank you. Just grabbed his box, avoided my eyes, and said, "Okay then." The door clicked shut behind him like punctuation. Not a comma, not an ellipsis, a period. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, still holding the folded shirt. Then I sat down at the table, my hands resting on the cotton, like it could tell me what had just happened. People say that's how it is with children. They grow up, they pull away. It's natural, but there's a difference between distance and disappearance. I didn't expect to be needed forever. I just didn't expect to be discarded. There were no fights, no dramatic scenes, just a slow unraveling. A missed call here, a skipped dinner there, a promise to visit that got pushed, then forgotten. Until one day, I realized he no longer spoke to me like someone who mattered. I was background noise, white static. I think the hardest part was pretending I wasn't hurt, telling myself this is what independence looks like, that I'd done a good job if he didn't need me anymore. But needing someone and valuing them, those aren't the same. After he left, the house grew too quiet, too big. I stopped cooking full meals. What's the point? When you're the only one at the table, I left the TV on at night just to hear voices. I started talking to the kettle as it boiled. It sounds pitiful now, but it kept me company in a way no one else did. I started writing letters I never sent. Not real letters, more like confessions. I'd sit on the porch, pen in hand, and just write to him. Today I saw a boy that looked like you at 8. Or I made your favorite soup even though I knew no one would eat it. I tucked them into a drawer like prayers I wasn't brave enough to say aloud. The first week he was gone, I kept his room tidy, made the bed, dusted the shelves. But by the 3rd month I closed the door. It hurt less not to look. When I told him I was moving into assisted living, he said, "If that's what you want." What I wanted was to hear. You don't have to, or at least, let me help. Instead, it was more like, out of sight, out of obligation. I packed my life into boxes, but he didn't come help. I hired a man with a van, the same van that had helped me pick out his first bicycle. Strange how things loop like that, memories dressed as strangers. At the home, my room is small. 1 window, 1 closet, 1 bed. It's not bad. It's just final, like a chapter no one plans to reread. Some nights I still imagine the sound of that door opening again, his voice calling Mom like he used to, when he lost something or had good news. But the door stays shut. It's funny. The moment that broke me wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was ordinary. Just a boy carrying a box, leaving behind the woman who once carried the weight of his whole world. And the silence he left behind. It didn't scream. It whispered, over and over again. You're not needed anymore. But I know that isn't true. I may not be needed, not in the way I once was. But I was loved once. And I loved. With everything I had. That has to mean something, even if it echoes in an empty house and fades down a hallway. No one walks down anymore. My hands remember things my heart tries to forget. They twitch when I hear a school bell in the distance. They ache when I see a little boy's jacket half-zipped. Sometimes they reach for phantom tasks, the adjusting of a scarf, the brushing of a crumb from a child's cheek, the tying of a shoe. Once I was always moving, pouring juice into little cups, buttoning shirts, pinning notes to backpacks. My hands were maps of devotion. They blistered, they wrinkled early, they cracked in the winter from washing so many dishes without gloves. But they never stopped, not once. They knew their job. They had a purpose. Now I rub lotion into them each night, more out of habit than hope. The skin is thin. The veins rise like pale rivers. And sometimes when the light hits just right, I see the life they used to carry. They remember holding his hand on the first day of school. He was nervous, so small. His backpack nearly swallowed him. I knelt down, cupped his cheeks, and said, "You're brave. You've got this." My fingers trembled a little, but not from doubt, from love that was trying not to cry. After that, I waited outside every day, sometimes in the rain, sometimes in the cold. I never wanted him to feel alone as he stepped into the big world. Even if all I did was stand there smiling, waving as he ran toward me, it mattered. Now I sit by the window at the home, watching the same school buses pass at 3:30. I don't know why I still do. Maybe I'm waiting for something my mind knows won't come. But my hands, they twitch, like they still expect to reach out and grab that little boy's hand again. He used to reach for me without thinking. If he got scared, tired, or just needed to know I was near, he'd find my hand. No hesitation. It was the surest thing in his world. And now I can't remember the last time he touched me without it being an obligation. A quick hug, a tap on the back, polite, not tender. Once during a visit, a rare one, I tried to smooth a wrinkle on his shirt. It was instinct. My hand reached out before I could stop it. He flinched, not rudely, but enough to remind me that my touch was no longer welcome in the way it once was. That's the cruelty of time. It doesn't just take your strength, it strips away the meaning of your gestures. What was once comforting becomes inconvenient. What was once natural becomes awkward. I used to touch his forehead when he was sick, stir soup with one hand and hold his with the other. Now I stir tea for myself carefully, slowly watching the steam curl upward like something escaping. I miss being needed. I miss being reflex, not thought, not schedule. Reflex. The way he once ran to me when he scraped his knee. The way he used to call out Mama before his tears even started. These days, I keep my hands folded in my lap, neat, quiet. They don't reach much anymore, except for the occasional photo on my nightstand, one of us when he was 5, grinning with a popsicle-stained mouth. My hand was on his shoulder in that photo. I remember how firm and proud my grip was. I wanted him to know I'm here. I've got you. He doesn't look at that photo anymore. I doubt he even remembers the day it was taken. But my hands do. My whole body does. And maybe that's what aging is, carrying the weight of moments no one else remembers. A private museum of touches, glances, breaths. I still whisper, "Be careful," when I hear the weather is bad in his city. I still reflexively turn my head when I see a child with messy hair, wondering if their mother forgot to smooth it down. I still reach, even if only in my mind. Because no one tells you that the hardest part of being a mother isn't the labor or the sleepless nights or even the letting go. It's the stillness after, when your hands forget what they're for. It was my birthday, not a milestone one, not a grand celebration sort of age, just another candle added to the quiet. I didn't expect balloons or cake or anything extravagant. Just a call, a voice, maybe a memory. But the day stretched on hour after hour and the phone remained silent. At first I told myself he must be busy. Meetings, errands, traffic. Life, after all, is full of noise. But as afternoon folded into evening, and the sky turned that gentle orange-pink I used to call soup light, my excuses began to falter. I sat at the little table in my room, the one near the window, with a cup of lukewarm tea and a small vanilla cupcake the staff had given me. One candle, one bite. I even sang happy birthday to myself under my breath. The absurdity of it made me laugh. Then the laugh broke in the middle and it didn't quite reach my eyes. I tried to remember the last time he remembered. I think it was a few years ago, maybe 5. He'd sent a text with a string of emojis and a generic message. Hope it's a good one, no call, no visit, but I convinced myself it counted. This time, there was nothing. Not a peep, no text, no email, not even a belated apology. Just silence, the kind that weighs on you like a wet coat. I watched the cupcake grow stale. I thought about the years I threw birthday parties for him. The themed decorations, the handmade banners, the carefully chosen gifts I saved for and wrapped with trembling hands. One year he wanted a dinosaur cake, and I stayed up until midnight shaping frosting into tiny green spikes, only to have him declare it the best day of his life. And now here I sat alone with a cupcake and the hum of the radiator. I stared out at the empty sidewalk below, half hoping he'd show up anyway, that this was all some kind of test of my patience, but no one came. There's a strange kind of betrayal in being forgotten on your birthday, not because of the missed celebration, but because it reminds you you're no longer circled on anyone's calendar. You've become a footnote, an afterthought. I tried not to cry. Tears felt like they would give the day too much power. Instead, I sat very still, listening to the ticking of the wall clock, a soft metronome, marking another year unnoticed. Someone once said that aging is becoming invisible. I used to think that meant to strangers. But the real pain is being invisible to the ones you raised, the ones you gave everything to, the ones whose birthdays you never missed, whose wishes you memorized like scripture. I remember one year when he was 9, he gave me a card that said, "To the best mommy who ever lived." He'd drawn us holding hands in crayon. I kept that card for decades. It's somewhere in a box now, packed up during my move. He didn't want to keep it. Said he had too much stuff. Maybe he thinks birthdays don't matter. Maybe he assumes I wouldn't want the fuss. But it was never about the fuss. It was about being remembered, being seen, being worth a moment of his voice. After the sun dipped and the hallway lights buzzed on, I blew out the candle by myself. I made a wish, something I haven't done in years. I won't say what it was, but it wasn't for him to call. It was for me to stop needing it. I wasn't trying to listen in. It just happened the way it does when silence is your closest companion, and a human voice suddenly slices through it, like music you didn't know you missed. He was on the phone. I recognized his voice before I saw him deepened with age, but still unmistakably his. I was in the lobby just coming back from a walk around the garden. My joints had ached that day and I was moving slower than usual, so I paused near the corner to catch my breath. That's when I heard him. He was laughing, not a polite chuckle or a distracted laugh. No, it was the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from him in years. Open, warm, effortless. He was talking to someone, his words spilling out fast, excited soft in that way people only speak when they feel safe. I listened without meaning to, like I used to listen at his bedroom door when he was a teenager and had his first crush. I only caught fragments. Something about a trip, something about dinner plans, and then the line that stuck with me like a splinter. "You're the only one I can really talk to." It wasn't meant to hurt. He didn't even know I was there. But those words lodged themselves in a hollow I didn't realize I still carried. Because once I was the one he confided in, the one who knew every worry, every triumph, every silly little dream. I was the keeper of his secrets, the safe shore he always returned to, and now I was just a wall he spoke past. He turned and saw me mid-conversation and gave a brief nod, the kind you give an old acquaintance. You're not sure you remember. Then he turned his back again, finished the call, and walked out the front door without a word. I stood there a while, not angry, not even shocked, just still, like someone who had been looking in a mirror and suddenly realized the reflection was gone. Later that evening, I tried to recall the last real conversation we'd had. Not logistics, not what time is your appointment, or do you need anything. A real talk, one with questions, curiosity, presence. I couldn't remember. It's strange how something so vital can vanish so quietly you don't notice until the emptiness echoes. He used to tell me everything. About the kids who teased him about the teacher, who scared him about the dreams he had of becoming a pilot, then a writer, then a doctor. I listened to them all like sacred texts. I held space for him even when I had nothing left for myself. Now I wonder, did he outgrow me? Or did I fade so gently that he stopped noticing I was there? The truth is, I miss being a person to him, not a responsibility, not a duty. A person whole, complex, worthy of conversation, of laughter, of being known. I never wanted to be his whole world forever. I just wanted to remain a part of it. Sometimes I replay old voicemails he left me when he was younger. "Hi, Mom, I made the team," or just calling to say I love you. His voice cracked a little in those early ones, all youth and honesty. I saved them like artifacts, like proof. I wasn't always invisible. But the silence now, it's heavy, not empty, but full of everything he doesn't say. Maybe one day he'll realize the conversations we didn't have were just as loud as the ones we did. And maybe by then I won't be waiting anymore. The first time I rode the bus to the clinic, I dressed like someone expecting company. I wore my good shoes, the ones with the soft insoles, and the little buckle he once helped me fasten when my fingers were too stiff. I put on lipstick too, even though the color has started to bleed into the creases around my mouth. I looked in the mirror and told myself, you still deserve to be seen. I walked to the stop, slowly cane in one hand, appointment card in the other, the pavement under me familiar, but somehow lonelier than I remembered. There was a time I used to drive, of course, back when my legs didn't ache so cruelly and my eyes didn't blur in the afternoon sun. But the car was sold before I moved in here, and asking him for rides that felt like knocking on a door I knew wasn't going to open. He never asked how I'd get there, never offered, just nodded when I said I'd figure it out. That's how it's been, me figuring it out. On that first ride, the bus was half empty, a few students with earbuds, a man talking too loudly on the phone, and me gripping the rail like the world might tilt. I sat near the window, hands folded neatly, and watched as the street slipped by places that once held meaning, now blurred with quiet indifference. I remember passing the corner where he used to play soccer. That little patch of field we used to run across after practice, him breathless with joy, me chasing him with a water bottle and a granola bar. Now it's a grocery store, a parking lot, life repurposed. When I arrived at the clinic, I checked in, filled out forms alone, sat in the waiting room alone. The nurse asked, "Is anyone here with you today?" And I shook my head with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Just me," I said, like that was always enough. After the appointment, I walked to the pharmacy across the street, picked up my prescriptions, clutched the brown paper bag like it was a trophy. It felt heavier than it should have, not in weight, but in meaning. Each pill, a quiet reminder of time's slow theft. I sat on the bench outside and watched cars pull in and out. People greeting loved ones, opening doors for each other, touching shoulders gently. I wasn't jealous exactly, just hollow. When the bus came back around, I climbed the steps slower. The driver offered his hand. I took it. It was a small thing, but it made my throat tighten. A stranger's steady hand when my own child hadn't even asked how I was getting home. I think what hurt most wasn't that he didn't come with me. It was that it never crossed his mind that I might want him to, that I might be nervous, that I might be afraid, that I might just want someone to sit beside me in that bright, too quiet waiting room and say, "You're not alone." But I was. And the truth is, I still am. He doesn't ask about appointments, doesn't remember the dates. If I bring them up, he says, "Oh, right," and then changes the subject. Like aging is an inconvenience he can't bear to look at. But I look at it every day, in the mirror, in the bus window, in the reflection of a woman who once drove a boy to soccer practice and now rides public transit with a brown paper bag full of pills and a heart full of things unsaid. I don't ride the bus because I like it. I ride it because it's all I have. And somehow in that reality, I've found a strange kind of dignity, not in being cared for, but in continuing even when no one watches. There's a nurse here named Lonnie, mid-30s, I'd guess. She wears lavender scrubs and always hums a little when she walks soft, tuneless notes, like a lullaby with no words. The first time I met her, she touched my shoulder gently and said, "You don't have to rush. We've got time." I almost cried, not because of the words themselves, but because no one had spoken to me that kindly in so long, that softly, that humanly. She remembers my name, not just what's printed on the chart, but how I like my tea in the morning, and that I can't take my blood pressure readings if I've been walking too long. She asks about my son sometimes. She doesn't know what happened, I haven't told her, but she can feel it, the absence, the heavy air that surrounds his name when I say it. And I've started noticing something I never thought I would. Sometimes strangers are gentler than family. Lonnie once sat with me in the activity room when I had a dizzy spell. She held my hand and talked to me about her daughter, how she was learning to read, how she wanted to be a mermaid for Halloween. I smiled and asked if she had her costume picked out, and for a few minutes we were just two women talking about children, not a patient and a nurse, not an old woman and her caretaker, just two hearts open and listening. It made me think of all the hours I spent listening to my son, to his rambling stories, his questions about the stars, his teenage rants about unfair teachers and bad cafeteria food. I listened. I held space. Now it's Lonnie who holds that space for me. It's humbling really to realize how hungry you've become for simple kindness. Not grand gestures, just someone remembering how you take your tea, someone noticing when your hands are shaking, someone looking you in the eye when they speak. The other day she sat beside me while I waited for my bus. She asked if I liked music and offered me one of her earbuds. We sat there listening to an old jazz song, sharing silence like it was something sacred. I thought about how long it had been since I shared something so simple with anyone. How long since I felt seen, not because I was someone's obligation, but because I was someone. He used to look at me like that, when he was little, when I'd pick him up from school and he'd run toward me like I was the sun, like I was safety. Now if he looks at me at all, it's with polite eyes, brief, impatient. The kind of glance you give someone you forgot to text back. I think that's why Lonnie's kindness cuts so deep. It reminds me of what I used to give and what I no longer receive. It's not that I expect her to care for me like family. That's not her place. But sometimes I wonder, why is it so easy for a stranger to treat me with dignity and so hard for my own child to do the same? There's a woman down the hall, Evelyn, whose son visits every Sunday, brings flowers, brings stories. They laugh together. She saves her jokes for him. I see her eyes brighten the moment she hears his footsteps. I used to have that look, that shine, that quiet little flutter in the chest when you know your child is coming to see you. Now I just sit quietly by the window, sip my lukewarm tea and nod at passing staff. Lonnie always nods back. It's not much, but in this season of my life, even that small recognition, that shared breath, feels like a gift. I never knew how much I needed to be acknowledged, not as a burden, not as a task, but as a woman who once held a family together with tired hands and endless love. Now I sit with strangers who see more of me than the person I raised. And it's painful, yes, but it's also freeing, because it reminds me that I am still here, that even in this small room, in this small life, I can still be worth a soft word, a gentle touch, And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. There are days I lie in bed and stare at the ceiling fan as it turns slow and steady like the rhythm of everything I've lost. It hums gently, almost like breath, the kind you take when you're trying not to cry, when you're trying to remember who you used to be before the forgetting began. I used to be everything, not in a proud, boastful way, no, just quietly, completely everything to someone. To him, I was the rhythm of his morning, the balm of his sickness, the arms he ran to when nightmares chased him out of sleep. Once he believed I could fix anything, a broken toy, a skinned knee, a bad day. All it took was my voice, my hands, my presence. I was home. And now I'm a room number, a chart, a monthly auto payment on a long list of expenses he probably resents. No one tells you that motherhood is a kind of disappearing act. You give and give and give, and in return you slowly vanish, bit by bit, gesture by gesture, until all that remains is a woman who wonders if she was ever seen at all. He used to come to me for every answer. Now I don't even know his questions. I imagine him out there thriving, busy, important. I tell myself it's good that I raised him to be strong, to move forward. But it's a strange grief to feel like your success came at the cost of being remembered. I used to be the center of his world. He used to draw pictures of me, with bright yellow halos around my head like I was his son. And now I am his past, something boxed and labeled and placed on the high shelf of his mind, where dust gathers and fingers no longer reach. There was a time he asked for my stories. Tell me about when you were little, Mom. What was your wedding like? Did you cry when I was born? Now I could pass away, and he might not know until a nurse calls. And I wonder, would he cry then? Would he regret the silence? Or would it just be a scheduling inconvenience, a shift in logistics, a few papers to sign? I don't want pity. I don't want obligation. I want recognition, that I was here, that I mattered, that my love was not invisible just because it was quiet. Once he fell off his bike and scraped his chin so badly he was inconsolable. I remember kneeling on the pavement, wiping away blood with shaking hands, whispering, "You're okay, you're okay, I've got you." He clung to me like a vine to a trellis. His tears soaked into my shirt. I held him until the sun went down. Now I cry in the dark and no one notices. I am not asking for him to rescue me. I've learned how to sit with pain. I've learned how to mother myself. But it would be nice just once to hear his voice say, "I remember. I see you. I'm sorry." Because I didn't become a mother expecting gratitude. I became a mother because love made me brave, made me tireless, made me strong in ways I didn't know I could be. But now that same love feels like a chain I forged link by link, and somehow I am the only one left holding it. Sometimes I write in my journal, "Today I was kind. I smiled at a stranger. I remembered who I used to be." It's not the same as being needed, but it reminds me I'm still someone. Even if no one calls, even if no one visits, I was the one they cried to once. I was the one who stayed awake all night. I was the one who carried their world in my arms. And that doesn't disappear just because they stopped looking back. He cleared out my house in a single weekend, came in with boxes tape and a look that said, efficient, not nostalgic. I watched from my armchair, the same one I used to rock him in, as he moved through each room like a stranger appraising someone else's memories. "This can go," he said, holding up a ceramic vase that once sat on the kitchen table for 20 years. "No one uses this." He didn't ask. He didn't wonder. He just decided. I tried to speak up once or twice. "Wait, that was your grandmother's, or I was saving that for your children." but he was already on to the next drawer, the next stack, the next shelf. He didn't ask what I wanted to keep. He just made piles trash donate storage as if a life could be sorted like laundry. At one point, he opened the bottom drawer of my old desk and pulled out a stack of envelopes. They were my letters, dozens of them. Some written years ago, some recent. Notes I'd slipped into his lunchboxes, birthday cards with careful handwriting updates I'd mailed when he stopped answering the phone. He thumbed through them, unread, then glanced at me and asked, "Do you need these?" Need. That word pierced me. I shook my head. I didn't trust my voice. He put them in the discard box. I watched my handwriting, my words, my love, my proof get packed away like clutter. He didn't even know what he was throwing away, and somehow that was worse than if he had done it cruelly. He just didn't care. Later, when he left the room, I dug the letters out and tucked them into my purse. I couldn't save much, but I could save that. Even if he never read them, they mattered. They were me. That house had been full of echoes of lullabies, sung over fevered cheeks of arguments in kitchens that always ended in hugs of birthdays, holidays, ordinary days made beautiful because we were together. And in one weekend, he stripped it bare. He kept the television, the coffee maker, some tools, but not the photograph of us at the beach, where he was 10 and buried in sand, laughing so hard, his nose crinkled, not the drawings he made me in kindergarten, not the pressed flowers from the year I turned 50, and he picked them himself. It was like none of it meant anything to him, like I had held these things alone. When he hugged me goodbye, it was quick, distracted. He said, "You'll be more comfortable at the facility, like it was a hotel, like it was a favor." I nodded, smiled. Didn't tell him I cried in the bathroom afterward. Not because I didn't want to go, but because he didn't see what I was losing. I wasn't mourning the things, I was mourning the meaning in them. The invisible threads, tying each object to a moment, a memory, a heartbeat. Now in my little room, I have only a few items, a framed photo, a chipped mug, a worn quilt, and a shoebox of those letters creased yellowing fragile like my hope. I read them sometimes, not aloud, just quietly, like I'm whispering to a younger version of myself, the woman who believed that love given was always love received. But I've learned some things you give simply because it's who you are, not because it will ever come back. And still I write new letters in my head, letters I'll never send. Today I missed the sound of your feet in the hallway. Today I remembered the way you used to say, "Mom," like it meant something. Today I was erased, but I remember myself. I taught him to be strong, to speak kindly, to look people in the eye and mean what he said. I taught him to tie his shoes and fold his laundry, to say please and thank you, and to never ever leave a room without telling someone you love them, just in case it's the last time. And somehow I raised a man who learned how to leave me without a second glance. There's a picture I keep by my bed. He's around 12 in it, smiling that big-toothed smile, holding a trophy from his first chess tournament. I'm standing behind him, both hands on his shoulders, beaming with pride. He didn't want to go to that competition, said he wasn't good enough. I sat with him the night before practicing openings, telling him it's not about winning, it's about showing up. Funny, now I'm the one who shows up week after week, and he's the one who doesn't call, doesn't visit, doesn't ask. I remember the first time he came home crying because someone called him a name. He was 7. I knelt down, wiped his tears, and said, "You don't have to be liked by everyone. Just be kind. Just be you." I remember how I held space for his feelings, no matter how messy, how loud, how inconvenient. And now that mine are quiet, aching things, there's no space left for them in his world. I taught him to be a man, but I didn't teach him what to do when the woman who raised him needed him back. Or maybe I did, and he chose to forget. That's the part I wrestle with. Not just the distance, the choice of it, the deliberate forgetting, the way he lets my messages sit unread, the way my birthday comes and goes like any other Tuesday. He was raised in warmth, not perfection, no, but love real and tangible in every meal, cooked, every ride given, every story listened to, even when I was tired and aching and would have given anything for 5 minutes of silence. And now that silence is all I have. He doesn't know that I still catch myself smiling when I see someone who looks like him walking past the front garden, or that I sometimes practice his name under my breath like a spell I'm afraid will lose its power. I think about the man he's become, respectable, successful, self-contained, a man others probably admire. But I wonder, does he know how much of him was built with pieces of me? The patience in his voice when he teaches others that came from the way I helped him sound out every word in his early books. The calm he carries in meetings that was born from the steadiness of my hands when he was sick. The way he comforts his own children if he has any. I pray it's rooted in the comfort I gave without ever asking for anything in return. I didn't just teach him to tie knots and balance checkbooks. I taught him how to love. And yet here I am, unloved in practice, if not in name. Some nights I imagine him visiting, sitting beside me, taking my hand not out of guilt, but recognition, saying, I know I've been gone, but I see you now, and I'm sorry. Not because I need the apology, but because it would mean he still remembers who I am beneath the wrinkles, beyond the gray hair, past the label of nursing home resident. I used to think that love was a circle, what you gave came back to you. But I've learned that sometimes love is a one-way gift, given and released, like a lantern sent into the sky. I just never expected to be the one standing in the dark watching the light float away. There's a hallway on the 3rd floor with pale green wallpaper and a row of dusty photo frames mounted under the fluorescent lights. I walk there sometimes slowly when my knees allow. Not because it's faster, it's the long way, but because halfway down there's a photograph I can't stop looking at. It's us, me and him. They took it when I first moved in. The staff thought it would be a nice keepsake for the residents, a family moment, preserved, framed, displayed. We were told to smile, to sit close, to look like love. And we did, or rather I did. I remember I wore my favorite sweater, the soft burgundy one he complimented once, when he was 15. You look warm in that, he'd said. It wasn't grand, but I held on to those words for years because they were rare. He wasn't one to say much, not even as a child, but when he did, I listened like it was gospel. In the photo, I'm smiling, leaning slightly toward him. He's sitting next to me, straight-backed, hands in his lap, not touching me, not leaning in. His smile is practiced, polite, distant. The kind of smile you give to strangers who hold cameras. I remember thinking at the time, at least he showed up. That's how low my expectations had gotten. Presence had become enough, not affection, not warmth. Just his physical body in a chair beside mine. Now, months later, I pass that photo and wonder if he ever remembers that day, if he even noticed how tightly I held his sleeve after the photo was taken, how I tried to linger, tried to keep him there just a few minutes longer. He left before lunch, said he had errands, said he'd come again soon. He didn't. The staff still comment on that picture when they see it. What a lovely moment, they say. Your son looks so kind. I smile. I nod. I don't tell them the truth that the kindness in that photo is mostly mine. Because what you can't see in a picture is the ache behind the eyes. You can't see the quiet, hoping that maybe, just maybe this time he'll stay a little longer. Ask a little deeper, remember who I used to be, not the shell, but the soul. The woman who sang to him when he had nightmares. The woman who once didn't eat for 2 days just to buy him the jacket he wanted for his birthday. You can't see love withheld in a photo, only love offered. Sometimes I stand in front of that frame longer than I mean to, just staring. Not because I like what I see, but because it feels like proof that I was once important enough to be photographed beside him. I wonder what will happen to that photo when I'm gone. Will someone take it down and toss it in a drawer? Will he claim it? Or will it just disappear like so much of me already has? I wish I had asked him just once to tell me the truth, not in anger, but in quiet honesty. When did I stop being someone you wanted to be near? But I didn't ask, because I was afraid of the answer. Or maybe because deep down I already knew. That photo is still there. 3rd frame from the left. Slight tilt, small crack in the glass. Like me, still present, still smiling, still slightly broken. But there. And maybe that's enough. It rained last Thursday. Not the gentle kind, the downpour that soaks your clothes in seconds, that fills your shoes, that blurs your vision, whether or not you're crying. I had misjudged the clouds, left my umbrella behind. I was sitting at the bus stop outside, the clinic purse clutched to my chest, paper bag of prescriptions softening in my lap. And I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. I'd been caught in storms before. So many, in fact, that my body instinctively knew how to hunch, how to protect the vulnerable parts, how to breathe through soaked fabric and skin that stung from cold. Once when he was little, maybe 6 or 7, we got caught in a rainstorm just like that one. I was picking him up from school on my bicycle. The sky had been blue when I left the house, clear and smiling. But on the way home, the clouds came in like a warning, and then it let loose thick, pounding drops that made him gasp and squeal. I remember pulling over under an awning, both of us dripping. He was cold teeth, chattering hands tight around my waist as I tried to shield him with my coat, and in that moment I laughed too, because he looked up at me, eyes wide and terrified, and said, "Mom, are we going to melt?" I kissed his wet forehead and told him, "We're not made of sugar. We're made of love. And love doesn't melt." I believed that then. I said it with conviction. I still want to believe it now. But last Thursday, I sat soaked on that bus bench, and no one came to help. The driver saw me through the windshield and ran over with a towel. Not him, not my son, a stranger. And I thought all these years later I'm still standing in the rain alone, still telling myself I'm made of something strong enough to survive this. I didn't expect him to be there. Not really. But I think part of me always hopes that maybe, just maybe, he'll remember, that he'll picture me soaked through, struggling with a cane and a paper bag, and something inside him will ache, that he'll feel that old reflex, I have to find her. I have to make sure she's okay. But he didn't call. He never does. And so I rode the bus home, my coat heavy with water, my breath fogging up the windows. People talked around me, someone sneezed. Someone laughed, and I sat quietly letting the rain dry in cold patches against my skin, pretending I wasn't shivering. I thought of all the storms I carried him through. The literal ones, yes, but the others too. Heartbreaks, failures, doubts. Every time he fell, I was there with shelter, with warmth, with unwavering presence. And now here I was, all damp and visible. Just another woman on a bus whose son doesn't call. But something strange happened as we passed the intersection where the playground used to be, the one he loved when he was small. I remembered him running through puddles there, once soaked, and laughing arms spread like wings. And I realized something. I didn't need to be rescued. I had been the rescuer. I was the rain shelter, the warm towel, the home. And even now, even soaked and alone, I carried that love like a torch, not for him to see anymore, but for me, to light my own path, to warm myself when no one else remembered how. Because I am not made of sugar. I am made of love. And love does not melt in the rain. The driver knows my name now. Every Thursday morning, as regular as the ticking of the hallway clock, I shuffle onto the city bus with my cardigan buttoned up to my chin and my purse clutched tight, and he greets me like an old friend. "Morning, Miss L," he says, with a smile that doesn't pity, just sees. He doesn't ask questions, doesn't pry, but he waits patiently as I ease myself up the steps one careful foot at a time, like someone who understands what slowness can mean. There's a kindness in that waiting, the kind that makes my throat tighten unexpectedly. He nods when I sit in the third row, my spot now unofficial, but mine, and he always checks the mirror to make sure I'm settled before pulling away. Once, when I dropped my bag and my pills scattered across the floor like seeds, he pulled over without a word, helped me gather them up gently, and said, "Don't worry, I've got time." That phrase again, "I've got time." It lands softly like a hand on the shoulder, because the truth is not many people offer me their time anymore. Everyone seems to be moving so fast, my son especially. I imagine him in some sleek office phone buzzing calendar, full, always moving forward. I used to envy that. Now I just mourn what it pushed out of the way. Sometimes on the ride home, I watch the city blur past and pretend I'm a traveler, not just an old woman, heading back to her small room with the creaky bed and the wilting plant on the windowsill. I imagine myself somewhere else, a bookstore cafe maybe, or a beach town with the scent of salt and old paperback pages. And then I look around and realize the bus is the only place I go that feels like motion. Everything else is stillness, waiting, remembering. There's a power in small rituals, I suppose, knowing that once a week I will be seen, spoken to, helped, even if it's just by the driver whose name I still don't know, though I should. He once asked me if I had kids. I nodded and said a son. He smiled as if that answered everything. He didn't ask more, and I was glad for it, because I didn't want to explain that my son knows I take the bus, that I mentioned it once, casually hoping he might offer to drive me, that he changed the subject, that I never brought it up again. I didn't want to explain that the man who once sat on my handlebars laughing through the wind now doesn't even ask how I'm getting home from a doctor's appointment. I didn't want to say that the most consistent male presence in my life now is a bus driver who holds the door and says, "See you next week, Miss L." And still I ride, because there's a quiet dignity in showing up, even when no one cheers you on, even when no one notices, even when the people you love most have forgotten to look back. Each week I walk to that stop, not because it's easy, not because it's pleasant, but because it's mine, a piece of rhythm, a thread of autonomy, and maybe in some quiet way it's a protest. Not against my son, not even against the world that moves on without me, but against the lie that old women become irrelevant, that we stop mattering once we stop being needed. I matter. I mattered when I was biking him to school. I mattered when I packed his lunch with trembling hands. And I matter now as I ride the bus alone, holding my own weight steady and upright, even when my legs beg me to rest. I may not be fast, I may not be visited, but I show up. And that too is love. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. That realization didn't come with fireworks or tears. It came quietly, like a gentle wave that no longer reaches the shore. I sat there one evening, the phone resting next to my tea, and I looked at it, really looked at it, and thought, I don't expect it anymore. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I stopped expecting to be loved back in the way I used to be. That's the hardest part to admit, not the grief of being forgotten, but the stillness that follows when you finally understand no one is coming. I didn't tell anyone. I just let the silence be what it was. Heavy, yes, but also clean. Like clearing a room of furniture no one sits in anymore. I used to leave the hallway light on just in case he visited late. I'd fluff the pillow on the guest chair, straighten the blanket, put out 2 mugs mine, and the one with the chipped handle he used to love. I stopped doing that too. There's a kind of dignity in letting go, in choosing to stop begging the world to notice your ache. I still think of him, every day in fact, not with bitterness that burned out long ago, but with something quieter, a dull pulse in the chest when I hear someone say his name, a passing ache when I see a mother and son sharing a joke on the sidewalk. He lives a life now that doesn't have room for me. I accept that. I don't understand it. I don't think I ever will, but I accept it. I've begun talking more with the others here. I never thought I would. I used to keep to myself, still clinging to the hope that he would be enough, that he would show up and fill the gap. But he didn't, and others have. There's a woman here who crochets socks for everyone, a man who recites poetry from memory. When the air gets too heavy with silence, they remind me that I'm not the only one who has been left behind. We're a quiet tribe, the forgotten ones. We don't shout. We don't complain. But we know how to sit with each other's silence, like it's something sacred. Last week I sat with Lonnie the nurse, while the rain tapped gently on the window. She didn't speak, and neither did I. But there was something so warm in that moment, I almost wept. Because sometimes love isn't a grand gesture. Sometimes it's just someone staying beside you without trying to fix the ache. That night I lay in bed and whispered aloud to the dark, I forgive him. And I meant it. Not because he asked, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved the peace of it. Because I'm tired of carrying the weight of what he won't see. Because I've begun to see myself again, not just as a mother, but as a woman who once gave everything, and who still has something left, even if no one asks for it. And so I stopped waiting. I stopped flinching when the phone didn't ring. I stopped refreshing my memory with every birthday he forgot. I stopped hoping he'd say thank you. Instead, I held my own hand. I looked in the mirror. I nodded at my reflection and said, "You're still here." And that is no small thing. Because the quietest goodbye I ever gave wasn't the day he walked out of my house. It was the day I let go of needing to be held in his. I used to think love was measured by who shows up, who remembers, who says your name with warmth. But now I know sometimes love is what you carry when no one else does. Sometimes it's in the way you hold your own coat closed in the wind, in the way you climb the bus steps alone, in the way you stop setting out the extra teacup. It's quiet now, the kind of quiet that doesn't ache, just breathes. The kind that fills the room after the last light is turned off and you've made peace with the dark. I no longer keep my phone on the pillow beside me. It rests on the dresser now across the room, where I can't reach it without effort, where it rings sometimes, but rarely for me. And still I sleep. Because I've learned the absence of someone else's voice doesn't mean I have no story left. My story is still here, etched into the lines on my hands. The softness of my voice, the memories that rise like mist when the afternoon light hits the window just right. I don't need to be remembered the way I once did. I don't need apologies or explanations or even to be seen in the same light again. I only need to know that what I gave was real, and it was. They say a mother's love is unconditional. That's true. But so is her dignity. And in this small life I live now, among folded blankets, remembered rainstorms, soft footsteps in the hall, I found a kind of peace, not loud, not triumphant, but real, quiet, steady. Because I did not vanish, I did not disappear. I became the silence that held everything. And in that silence I found myself again, not as someone's mother, not as someone forgotten, but as someone who endured, who softened, who stayed. Not because they asked me to, but because I chose to. I didn't need to be loud. I just needed to leave. And I have.